Welcome to We and Lewis, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the remarkable, creative, and energetic people who live in Lewis and are helping our community forge a collective soul as appealing as it is unique. These are their stories and their words. They are the we in Lewis. I'm your host, Kevin McGinnis. Our guest today is Dr. Krista Griffin, a certified functional medicine practitioner, a certified acupuncturist with 3 decades of treatment room experience as a licensed chiropractor. Today, her professional focus is on bioresonance therapy. Her entire career has been spent on finding different ways to enable the body to heal itself by restoring balance to the body, mind, and spirit. Simply put, she's dedicated her life to educating and empowering people to tap into the inherent healing potential of their own bodies, and her mission has remained unchanged. Guide your mind and body back into balance. Today's episode is brought to you on behalf of the Open Space Alliance, a nonprofit initiative working in conjunction with federal, state, and local authorities to raise public and private funds to acquire the 4th Street Preserve, 30 acres of forested land within the city limits of Lewis. Amazingly, this historic property was first deeded in 1670 and has since been held by only a handful of private owners. With your help, this land will be owned by the city and managed under a conservation easement to ensure that it will be, in perpetuity, a protected habitat preserve for native flora and fauna. Imagine a natural bulwark against the ceaseless construction encroachment that has overwhelmed our area. For more information about this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity or how to contribute, visit osalewis.org, osalewis.org. If they are successful, Lewis's new motto may be the first city in the first state with the first urban forest. Krista, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Tell us about your practice.
I base my practice off of the philosophy in chiropractic that the power that creates the body is the same power that heals the body. And when I was in chiropractic school, that was the brain and the nervous system that controlled everything. Later on, when I had learned about embryology and how a sperm and an egg came together and those 2 cells created 4 cells and 8 and 16, somewhere around 64 replications, this blackberry shape started to indent. And that indentation became the hard palate. So there was no nervous system yet. So it can't be the nervous system. So maybe it's the nucleus of the cell. Maybe it's where the DNA is. The work of Bruce Lipton later on that I had learned was that you can take the nucleus out of a cell and it can still survive and live. So it wasn't the nucleus. So what is that power that creates the body? Is the power that heals the body. And that's where my practice focuses. It focuses on what is it that's inside of us that is keeping our heart beating, that is digesting our food. How does it know to do that? And why is it that I can ask you to think about taking a deep breath and exhaling. And then I can ask you to breathe normally. And it's almost impossible not to influence your breath once you become aware of it. So if we can influence our autonomic nervous system, we can influence our biology by our thoughts, there has to be something in that. And that is kind of the crux of my practice. It is how you can tap into that healing power within you by your thoughts, by intentionality.
What is bioresonance therapy?
Bioresonance is the vibration of life. That is what it translates into. And so everything has a vibration. Everything has a frequency. And in order to explain the therapy part of it, we have to back up to when you were in middle school and you learned about the atom. The atom, if you recall, in the center has protons and neutrons, and then it has an electron ring around the outside. And that electron ring is what bonds to other electrons and makes these atoms come together to form different substances, right? And so how they bond will determine whether it's a countertop, a stool, or your shirt. So everything is made of atoms. These atoms, if you took the center of the atom and you blew it up to the size of a golf ball, the electron ring would be 2 miles away. So in between the center of the atom and the electron ring, there's nothing. There's just space. there's just an electromagnetic field, and that positive charge of the protons and the negative charge of the electrons is what's keeping the electrons from flying out 5 miles away. It's that electromagnetic field that carries all the information of what's happening within the cell. If you take atoms, and atoms bond together to form molecules, and molecules form cells, and cells form tissues, and tissues form organs of the body, what we can find is that if we look at the body as a whole, the body as it is formed of 70 trillion cells, and each cell is made up of 100 trillion atoms, the body itself is also mostly space. It is mostly energy. That space that exists within each atom is 99.99999% of what that atom is. So you are mostly energy, you are mostly space if you are mostly atoms. So in that space, all of the information, all of the energy of that particular molecule or structure or countertop or body exists. So bioresonance, what it's doing is it's measuring the vibration. It's looking at what is the vibration, what is the frequency of whatever it is that it's looking at, whether it's looking at a knee or maybe it's looking at the skin or a liver. What it's doing is everything has a frequency, and it's a known frequency. Bioresonance is measuring that frequency to find areas where there are coherent waves, meaning nice and orderly waves, or areas of incoherence, meaning that the wave itself is having some dissonance. It's actually, I like to think of it as static. And with this information, we can also see whether or not there's a part of the body that is lacking energy. It's lacking resources. The frequency of the tissues is what is measured with bioresonance. So we can actually look to find what areas of the body are incoherent, what areas of the body are lacking energy, and what areas need to have more support in order to be able to be part of balance, to be part of the whole. And that's what I do with bioresonance. I use technology to measure these fields that exist around the body as a whole, but also tissues and structures individually.
So if I understand what you're saying, at the atomic level, we're not skin and bones, but really we're a billion atoms carrying an electrical charge. Is that right?
That's correct. Crazy to think about, isn't it?
It is. From the standpoint of quantum physics and quantum mechanics, sciences most of us don't associate with health and treatment, if we associate with them at all. Is it fair to say that the Krista I see sitting across from me here at Kindle is not really who you are?
That's right.
By the way, this isn't new. Albert Einstein talked about this in 1905. The same is true with Niels Bohr, Max Planck, and so many other Nobel Prize winning physicists. To them, we're really a pulsating field of energy interacting with other pulsating fields of energy, right?
That's correct. Harold Sexton Burr, back in 1947, he measured the frequency of 10,000 women. And what he found is that women who had uterine cancer all had this same frequency pattern. But there were 10 women that had the pattern that did not have uterine cancer. And to him, he was confused because he thought, wow, I thought I had I thought I discovered something. I thought I found a way to diagnose uterine cancer just by this static that he found in the frequency pattern in the field. All 10 of those women that had the frequency of uterine cancer that did not have uterine cancer developed it later in life. So what that means is that the frequency of disease actually exists in the electromagnetic field before it exists in the body. The field carries all the information that exists within the body, and it carries it even before the body is experiencing it, which is part of why bioresonance is so exciting, because we can actually find areas of disorder before they actually present in the body.
If someone has an appointment with you, what exactly can they expect to experience during the appointment?
During the appointment is pretty standard. We will bring you in, we'll put some headphones on. You may or may not have your hands also on a board. It will depend on what we're going to do that day. We'll scan the body, and you'll be able to see in real time, as it's scanning your body, different tissues of the body, different areas, different organs, to find out where you may have areas of decreased energy and decreased communication in the cells, which we call incoherence. You will measure those, and then after that, we'll actually go and start to elevate the frequency in those spaces that are incoherent and start to create more balance and harmony. So the technology I use actually will filter out the dissonant or the incoherent signals and amplify your healthy signals back to you. So I'm just giving you more healthy you back to you.
What type of issues does this therapy treat?
I'm very careful to make sure that I don't tell people that I treat anything, because I really don't. What I do is I treat the body holistically to have it bring itself back into balance. That being said, there are people that come to my office with a lot of different conditions that are looking for support to be able to bring their body back into that state where it can heal itself. And some of the conditions that people come to me with are cancer, neuropathies, addictions, infections, gastrointestinal problems, long COVID, Lyme disease. It's pretty much, it runs the gamut. And I usually get people that are pretty sick, because by the time you find me, I'm not usually your first line. I'm somewhere not even second, third, I'm fourth or fifth down the line. You really have to be looking and recognizing that you need something else besides something outside of you, besides the surgery, besides the drugs. There has to be another way. And so I like to think that I'm a great adjunct to the care that they are getting elsewhere, because what I do, there are no side effects. Really, there's just direct effects. And the direct effects are, I just make your body stronger and more resilient. So anything you do, you will actually be able to tolerate better. You'll get better results from. So if you're going to take a drug or you're going to do hyperbaric oxygen, all of those things should work better because your body will actually be functioning better.
All health treatments seem to come with a warning label. What are the risks of this kind of treatment as opposed to other options?
The risks are you might change. You might have a new life, because we can't determine what is going to shift in your body. I've had people that have come to me. I can think of this one patient in particular. She came and she wanted help with one condition, and I scanned her and I treated her that day, and she came back a month later and I'm like, "How you doing?" She's like, "I'm awesome. I quit my job. I broke up with my boyfriend. I bought a Harley, and all of these things shifted in her life." I had another person who, for the first time in 40 years, stepped up to her father, who, she was having an abusive relationship with, and completely cut ties. I've seen a number of these different shifts in personal matters in people's lives that it's making me wonder, is it because their bodies in their fields are becoming more coherent that anything that no longer resonates with them, anything that no longer fits with who they are now, falls away? I had a woman also who came to me for addiction. We started working together, and as she changed, I don't say that I treat addictions. That wasn't what I was going to do with her. I was just trying to get her more coherent, because there were a lot of things in her life that needed some support. But what happened was, as she started to improve, she chose to stop drinking. And she always stopped drinking on the days she had the appointments, and it usually would last for a few days. And I think it's because her energy was probably becoming more coherent, that the reasons that she probably felt the need to drink were actually different. They were starting to fall away. So the side effects, I think, are be careful. You might become a different person.
If I understand what you're saying, you come in, you sit down or lie down, you're wearing headphones, maybe one or two other things. There's no cutting, there's no twisting, there's no manipulating. You're just working with the electromagnetic field around the person. And you may experience not necessarily what you came in for, but you may experience some very positive changes.
That's exactly right. And I'm glad you brought that up about, I'm not twisting, I'm not touching. This treatment in and of itself is where I am really just helping you. You're the one who's doing all the work. That's the beauty of this one.
Is the intent or the hope that it will work sufficient?
There's a lot of strong evidence about the placebo effect, that if you believe in something, you'll have better results. I will say this: if you make the effort to call my office and to come in and to sit down there, you already are showing intent to heal. I don't know how to take that out of the equation, right? Because if you've shown up, you have the intention. So you don't necessarily have to believe in it. I think people are curious, and maybe they're hopeful. And if I do a good job of educating them as to what is happening, then they're able to kind of just sit back and recognize in totality. They might not lose the neuropathy that they came here for, but what else shifts and changes? Is their digestion better? Is their mental clarity better? Are they sleeping better? So all of those things are standing in the way of them healing from whatever that symptom is that's been standing there for a long time, if that makes sense.
Bioresonance therapy is not sort of in the traditional list of healthcare practices. How did you come about learning about this therapy and wanting to become a therapist?
It was a Hail Mary for me. My husband was sick with long COVID. My son was having a hard time recovering from COVID. And there was nothing I had in my tool bag with functional medicine, with chiropractic, with acupuncture that was getting them better. And I just decided I needed to try something else. I knew that there was a power within the body that heals the body. And I know that it can be accessed through thoughts, feelings, and emotions, because that electromagnetic field that's being measured with bioresonance, it actually responds to your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions. And if I could just get my husband to recognize that he can shift the field by thought alone, or if I can get my 13-year-old son to start thinking about feeling better and visualizing it, then they could get there. But the truth is not everybody's able to do that, especially when you're so sick. It's so hard to overcome your body and your environment to say, no, I'm well, and start to feel well before it ever happens. It's hard to do that. It's hard to shift the field. So I knew I needed help. I knew I needed something that would be where people could see it, where he could see it, and he could watch things change. So it was really a Hail Mary. My husband had been out of work for so long, and I had known about this technology. I thought, I was like, there was something in me that just said, I think this can work. I think this could work. So when I had purchased the unit, I bought this unit. It's from the Ukraine, and I had to train with a Ukrainian physician and a translator on Skype. This was during COVID. Before the Ukraine, it was right as the war was escalating in the Ukraine and they were being bombed. We would have rolling blackouts. It was definitely a challenge, but I would train with them for 3 hours, and then 2 days later I had another 3-hour session, and I had to know what I did the first 3 hours because these ladies, they were no nonsense. They would say, that is wrong, do it again. So I only had my husband to practice on because I wasn't working. And I would just put him on this unit. And I'm like, all right, I got to do it again. I got to figure out if I can get the buttons. I got to figure out what this means. I would just practice on him in between my sessions. And he started to improve. Just by the mere act of doing the scan, what happens is there's a neurofeedback component as well, where the brain wants to be coherent. That's the natural state of being. His eyes were watching the screen, and his brain was starting to incorporate and try to change because it knew where the healthy tissues were. It wanted to be healthier. So as I'm working on him, I didn't even know how to treat him yet. I was literally just scanning him. And 6 weeks after I'd bought that unit, he was well enough to go back to work.
And he had been sick for how long with COVID?
He had been out of work for 7 months. So this was it was a big deal.
If someone wants to learn more about this, if they want to understand what it is, because it seems to me, at least from an intellectual standpoint, this could apply to anything. It doesn't have to be, we've given up, we've tried everything else. It could literally apply to anything in your life.
I agree.
Where should that person go?
There's not a ton of research. There are some research studies on bioresonance. However, it's not very well funded. So you have to dig a little bit. But one of the companies is in Germany. It's called BICOM. They have BICOM.com. That's one place to look. You can also just research bioresonance. There are articles, and there will be some information. A lot of times you'll see it for allergies. That's one of the things. It's FDA approved in the United States for allergies as an appropriate treatment. But there are some articles out there. You just have to dig. Go to like the 3rd and 4th page on your Google search, then you'll start to find it.
And they can go to your website.
Yeah, my website has a lot of information too.
Which is?
drkristagriffin.com.
And is it true that bioresonance therapy is much more accepted in Europe?
It is. We went to the Poconos and I had brought the unit with me because that's just what I do. And there was one day, our son and I were going to go to a water park, and Stuart decided he was going to stay back at the VRBO. And he was there when a maintenance guy came to take a look at the air conditioning units. And the guy who pulled up on a motorcycle comes in, and Stuart started talking to him, and he's walking around the apartment, and he saw, because it was all mini splits, we had to go into every different room, and he saw this bioresonance machine, this TheraWellness on the ground. He goes, "Is that a Bicom?" Which is the name that they have in Germany. And Stuart goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "How do you know about bioresonance?" He goes, "I'm from Poland." He goes, "There's one in every doctor's office in Poland." He's like, I just bought my wife one for her birthday because you can't get them here." And Stuart's like, "Wow, that's crazy. What does your wife do?" He goes, "Oh, she's a quantum physicist and studies bioresonance and its effects on biology." He's like, "What?" So it is definitely more well-known in Europe than it is here.
You started as a chiropractor, right?
I did.
And where did you first start practicing?
My first job was in Florida, and I worked in an MD-DC practice, which was a great experience. I learned a lot there. One of the things I think that I took away from there was, number one, how I don't want to practice, because I think you learn a lot sometimes in those types of situations, and also to trust my gut. And if I spent enough time with patients, that they would tell me what was wrong. So when I came back north, where I wanted to be, back in the Northeast, I realized that I needed to do things my way. And I always took more time with patients than traditional chiropractors. My visits were always at least 20 minutes. They started out closer to 30. And then I got so busy they had to be 20 minutes. But now I'm back up to an hour a visit, because I think it's really important to spend time with people, because then you really get to recognize that the treatment may not be the adjustment. It may not be the bioresonance. It may not be the acupuncture or the supplement you gave. The treatment may actually be just being with someone and allowing them to be heard. It may be, just touching them is what they need. Who knows? So the magic happens if you just spend the time with someone.
You realized there was more to what you needed to do or could do than was available just by being a chiropractor. What led you to these other forms of treatment?
I was a medical acupuncture class. We did less theory and more about this is how you do it. And there was one day the instructor said, "Listen, if you're within a quarter size area of where the point is, you're going to get good results. If you're within a dime, you're going to get great results. If you're right on it, you're going to get miraculous results. But don't worry about how deep the needle is, because the points might not even be within the body. They might be outside the body." And it was one of those times where your brain goes, "What? How is that even possible?" And then he says, if you look at the needle, it's round with metal with a little loop on top. It may be that it's an antenna that is taking information and putting it through the needle into the body. And it was one of those times I just had to take that information and put it on the shelf, because I did not have a hook in my brain to put that anywhere. It did not fit into anything I had known or learned up to that point.
You're saying that with acupuncture, you may not actually have to insert the needle. It could even just maybe be touching the skin and have an impact. I ask this as only one who I think is just fundamentally terrified of someone sticking a needle in me, let alone all the places that acupuncturists seem to stick them.
Right. I think that might be true. And if you think about reflexology, you're just pushing on the area, or you can use lasers, where you point it right at the point. So I don't know that you do need to pierce the skin. To me, all of a sudden, it just opened up a whole nother world that if I intend to be on the point, that actually is part of it too. So now it's my intention when I walk into the room, if I intend to do something with this needle, that's actually changing the way it works as well. So it really started to crack open another area that really was closed up to me. I had never even thought about it up until this point. After acupuncture and chiropractic, I did, those two for a while, and I realized I still needed more. So I ended up getting a certification in functional medicine.
What does it mean to get certified in functional medicine?
Functional medicine is a natural way of diagnosing the body. So it uses things like saliva and breath and stool. And there are different blood tests you can do, and you can look at nutrient status of the blood. It's really just looking at the body more holistically. Instead of our traditional medical tests, it goes a little bit deeper. And it primarily uses natural substances to balance the body. Sometimes you'll have to have a prescription, but I don't write prescriptions. So for me, to be able to have some form of supplements or herbs or nutritional ways to support the body, that actually added another layer to my practice.
All of these different treatments you're looking at, they all seem to be breaking away from sort of the traditional or conventional way of treating people. You keep going back to, or you keep searching for the next realm where thought or the body itself can heal itself, as opposed to intrusions and all and chemicals and what have you. Did this lead to your interest in meditation?
It absolutely did. But I will say that I found meditation not so much for the practice and for moving my profession forward as much as it was personally. I had found myself in a really dark place, which is where we often find things that change our lives. I was just really exhausted and depleted after having our son, and I walked into the delivery room as one person and walked out as somebody else. And that shift of being a new mom was really, really hard. And I don't know that you can ever prepare for it. I don't know that anyone could prepare you for it. So I had to find a way to ground myself and bring myself into my body and into balance. And I had stumbled across Joe Dispenza. And he does meditation. He teaches meditation, but he does it from the standpoint of a scientific basis. So now I can really get behind that, because he will explain the science behind what happens when you close your eyes and start to go inward. What happens physiologically, biologically, when you start to connect to your heart, your mind, and actually this field around your body. And that field around the body is the same field that I am measuring with bioresonance. So it's almost as if everything has started to kind of finally come together in a box. It's not tied up with a bow yet, because I think that it's always evolving, but we're starting to get all of these pieces of this puzzle starting to come together.
Some of us think that meditating involves sitting somewhere in nature, cross-legged with our palms facing upwards. You don't have to do all that to meditate, is that right?
You don't. And actually, the work that I do with Joe Dispenza, it's actually work. It is not sitting, relaxing with, in nature and breathing deep. It's hard work. We're actually overcoming ourself over and over and over again. We'll do hours of sitting and going within and recognizing that these thoughts always want to come up, and they want to circle, and they want to keep pulling your attention back to the known. They want to keep pulling your attention back to what you have to do, what you didn't do, what's coming up next. And it's that collapsing of the mind back into right now that starts to bring you into that really beautiful space where meditation happens. So you don't have to sit cross-legged. You don't have to sit on a certain cushion, but there's a lot of different ways to do it. So we do it in his work where we do it standing with our eyes open, with our eyes closed. We do it walking. We do it sitting. We do it lying down. We do it in so many different ways so that you actually could meditate throughout your day. You can bring yourself to that centered space as you're moving through your life.
What kind of impact or results have you found that meditation can have?
There's a lot of great research right now. There's a movie that just came out. It's called Source. It's a documentary. Source, It's Within You. And it shows the science. It's from UCSD in California. A bunch of scientists have come together and they started to look at what happens when people go and do meditation. And they have found that through meditation, just spending the time doing it, you can upregulate 1,300 to 1,400 beneficial genes for restoration and repair and for immune system function. They did studies where they actually had people meditate for someone else, almost like praying. They did meditation for these people with PTSD. 90% of them improved from PTSD, and that's a really hard thing to treat. To have 90% of anything, any intervention work is unheard of.
And these were someone else doing the meditating on an individual's behalf, not the individual.
That's right. The power that exists in this is, we're just scratching the surface. If we could all just sit back for a moment and recognize, there's been groups that have meditated for peace, 4,000 people that have sat and meditated for peace, and it's changed hospital admissions and car accidents and premature births and violence for a year after the meditation stopped. It lowers all of those things. We have to recognize that if we were to just embrace meditation individually, 5 minutes a day, and if it was just for the well-being of everyone else, or for the collective consciousness to have everybody have the food they need, the shelter that they need, I think that we actually can change society. If people can meditate for someone else and change post-traumatic stress disorder, one of the hardest things to treat, have a 90% cure. It wasn't even improvement, it was actual cure according to the people that had PTSD. This is incredible.
All of these practices, all these different forms, all seem to keep coming back to the same core issue, which is you're looking, treating, working with the person as an atomic entity, not as a physical entity in the traditional sense. That seems to be the common theme. So as you were acquiring these other practices or these other types of therapy and so on, they all seem to be building upon that atomic base.
That's a very good observation. That's absolutely right. Everything that I had done, even if I think about chiropractic, it was the power that creates the body heals the body, and from above down and out. It had a spiritual component to it, and it was about my intention with the patient that would make the adjustment. It wasn't always the adjustment. It was what happened in their body when they felt heard or touched. So I think this has been always the underlying theme that has just spiraled, and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be now.
And meditation can also help you with not physical issues, but other related mental issues that are going on in your life. So you might have limitations you're carrying around. I'm too old. I can't change how I think. I can't be happy. My life's unfair. Does it allow you to see these are just limitations you've accepted or we've accepted and not an inescapable reality?
What is reality, right? So reality is just the confines you've put on yourself. So if you think that I'm too old or I can't overcome this, then that is the information that is you're putting into your field of energy around you, your electromagnetic field, and your cells are listening to it, right? It's that biofeedback unit that's happening. It's that energetic component of you. That field of energy that I tap into with bioresonance is informing your cells. So if your thoughts affect the field and your thoughts are, I'm too old, we can very easily have a different thought. So we can change the thoughts to, I can do this. I'm so grateful to be alive today. I can't believe how great I feel. The real magic happens that if you feel crappy one day, but you get up and you mentally rehearse feeling great, you mentally rehearse what it would be like to be able to walk without pain, what it would feel like to be able to have all the energy, what would it feel like to go to bed at night and have a great night's sleep. If you were to go ahead and visualize that before it happens, what you're doing is you're putting that information to the field, and it's going to inform your biology. So there's any thought you have is just a belief. It doesn't mean that it's true. It's just something you've decided. You can choose you can choose something different.
And you have seen that sort of change happen in your practice. Is that right? Through meditation?
I have. There's been really amazing. I have some amazing things that I've witnessed, because who knows how people are going to take this and run with it. I've seen relationships and families change. It's been beautiful. I've seen people manifest all kinds of things that they've been excited about in their life. There's some studies that were done. There's a great study by Ellen Langer. She's a psychologist from Harvard, and she did a study where she took 80-year-old men And she decided, well, what would happen if I took these men and I put them in a place and told them to live as if they're 20 years younger? So she took all of these metrics of these 5 men. She took their height, their weight, looked at their blood pressure, test their cognition, their balance. And she said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take you to this monastery, was where it was going to be. And you're going to live as if you're 20 years younger. That was all of the instructions, nothing else. So they pulled up to the monastery and the door to the van opens and nobody helped these men with their luggage because 60-year-old men don't need help with their luggage, right? So they carried their luggage up the steps. And when they got inside, there were no mirrors. There were just pictures of these men 20 years younger. There were Life magazine covers from things that they had when they were younger and the music that they would have had and games they would have played when they were younger. And these men just lived there by themselves for 5 days. When she went to pick them up, she had no idea what was going to happen. The men were having a touch football game on the yard. And they did these metrics and they all had improved blood pressure, improved cognition, their height increased, their finger lengths increased because they lived as if they were 20 years younger. Their biology changed because of thought alone.
Was there any experience when you were young that helped nudge you in the direction that your life, your career has now taken?
I think it would be this moment. It was the night before I was starting chiropractic school. And I took a walk with my dad. And I had heard that chiropractors are not fans of vaccines. And I remember walking with my dad and I was like, Dad, they're anti-vaxxers. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I should be going here. And truth be told, I had never even had an adjustment yet as I'm going to my first day at chiropractic school because I was never allowed to because my dad thought they were quacks. But anyway, I was on my way. We're walking the night before and I was really nervous because I didn't know, can I handle this? And what did I get myself into? And he says to me, listen, you are going to learn a lot of things in school. Some things are going to make sense. Some things are not. It's up to you to decide what you're going to take and what you're going to put aside and what things you're just going to say, I'm not buying into that. He goes, you get to decide. You get to determine which ones you're going to incorporate. You don't have to take anything at face value. I think that way of moving through chiropractic school kind of set me up for where I am now.
What led you to Lewis?
I met my husband. He was on a blind date with someone else at my best friend's wedding. And he was living here in Lewis and I was in Philadelphia. And we did the long distance thing for 5 years. At the end of it, the last 6 months or so, he had come to live with me in Philadelphia. So we could see what it would be like to live together full time because weekend relationships are very different than day in and day out. And I didn't want to give up my apartment and give up my practice. And I dragon boated. I love dragon boating. I just didn't want to give up my whole life there in hopes that it would be okay if we were okay day in and day out, if we were meant to be together day in and day out. And so he moved to Philly for 6 months and it was awesome. And so I sold my practice. I packed up and here I am. That was in 2008.
And you opened a chiropractic studio over on the beach side of Lewis. Is that right?
I did. I opened Lotus Chiropractic in 2008 and I sold it to my partner, Holly Scarrow, in 2018.
You mentioned dragon boating. You were very involved with dragon boating in the past. Is there any chance that dragon boats are coming back?
Oh, it would be so fun if they did. I loved it. It was one of my best moments in Lewis, that first dragon boat race. And it's one of the things that makes Lewis so great. The first year that I did it, it was myself, my husband Stuart, and Gina Derrickson. It was the 3 of us. And it took months to get it approved through the city. So by the time we had all the approvals, we had 3 months to put this race together. And there was a huge learning curve because nobody knew what a dragon boat was. Nobody had done dragon boat racing before here. So I had to tell people, I'm like, listen, we're going to bring these 40-foot canoes. They're going to have 10 seats. I need you to get 20 friends. I need you to make some T-shirts and make a name up and give me $1,400. And we're going to race up and down the canal for a whole day for a weekend in September. And people are like, wait, we're doing what? I'm like, just do it. Just do it. Just trust me. Just do it. And the first year we had 21 teams show up. That was my favorite event because there were no expectations. It was a glorious day in September. And the park was buzzing. It was so much fun. The morning after, our beloved Matt DeSab, I saw him walking down the street in downtown Lewis. I'm telling you, he was either skipping or floating or something. He was bouncing because Striper Bites, he used to own Striper Bites. Striper Bites won the championship the day before. And the next morning, he's still bouncing and on high from it. It was one of those things that I'll never forget. And we did it 4 more years after that. And each one it was incredible in its own way. I loved it. It would be great if it could come back sometime.
But it takes a lot of administrative work. And does that mean it's harder for you to actually get in a boat?
I don't get to boat. I don't get to paddle at all, which was the point of bringing it. I was hoping to get people that were really excited about it, and maybe we can get a team, and then we can go travel around and race. However, I was too busy organizing. However, 1,000 people would get to learn how to paddle, which is really awesome.
What led you to believe that the Blue Zone project would be appropriate here in Lewis?
I think it's because of the results that it gets. So the blue zones are those 5 areas around the globe where people live to be 100 and they live to be 100 well. And the Blue Zone project is sprung out of that, of how could they reverse engineer the way people live in these areas and bring it to communities to see if they can improve quality of life, quality of well-being, making sure that people got to live healthier longer by having access to healthy foods and safe walking paths and biking paths. And I think it was the idea that it would be great to have equity here in Sussex County. Lewis is fantastic. Over 19958, there are a lot of areas that people are having food insecurity. And if we look at Delaware as a whole, over 70% of adults are overweight or obese, and over 30% of our children are overweight and obese. 11% of people in Delaware have food insecurity, and 149,000 have been diagnosed with a mental illness. So we need help. And I was with my good friends, Kim Blanche and Rita Williams, and Kim is in charge of BB Healthcare's Community Health Needs Assessment. And there's so many great organizations working to improve health outcomes in Delaware. However, she's in charge of doing these assessments, and it doesn't change. Every time they do it, it's like you just move the shells, right? Which one is going to be on top now? But it's always the same ones. It's diabetes, it's heart disease, it's cancer. It's just not moving. How do we make it so that we actually can have all of the work being done actually impact a community? And the blue zones, when we started to look into it and the results they were having, we thought, wait a minute, we need to really take this seriously, because not only do they have ways to take all of these organizations that are siloed and they create an umbrella. So now we actually can all work together. And that's the cool thing, because now we're actually starting to create these bridges where we're having all of the players at the table. Policy, people, places, food systems, schools. We're bringing them all together so that we can start to move the needle together as a collective.
But the heart of the Blue Zone project, as I understand it, is not to tell you what to do. It's to create the right or the healthy option and make it easier or the best option available. Is that right?
That's exactly right. It's a community-led initiative, completely voluntary. So if you want to go to, if our lovely store Lloyd's downtown, if they have an aisle that has things that are Blue Zone friendly and you want to choose that, that's great. But you don't have to. If we want to put a salad bar in the cafeteria at school, kids don't have to have salad, but if it's there, someone might choose it. Just like our bike path, right? I like to think of that one. The bike path is there. It doesn't mean you have to use it, but it's there if you want to. It just tries to bring more of those initiatives and make it so that it's all over Sussex County so that everyone can benefit from that type of environment.
If someone wants to learn more about the Blue Zone project here in Lewis, or just blue zones in general, where can they go?
The best place would be bluezoneproject.com. That's where you can see the results they're having through other parts of the country.
A decade or two ago, medical experts and pharmaceutical companies generally dismissed meditation and acupuncture as just so much pseudoscience. Today, according to the Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the fact that they were assessing this is a pretty interesting indication unto itself, nearly 20% of Americans practice meditation at some point during the year. Use of acupuncture is doubling every year. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer observed that all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's aggressively opposed. And third, it's accepted as self-evident. Do you see a day when bioresonance therapy, meditation, all of these things will be considered self-evident?
I hope so. I think science is catching up. There doesn't seem to be any downside in trying these things. So the one beautiful thing about meditation and yoga and acupuncture, they're safe. So the worst thing that can happen is nothing, right? So you spent some time, or you spent a little money, or you sat and crossed your legs for 20 minutes, but you'll be more relaxed. Like there's no downfall in doing it. So I think that people are starting to open up to recognizing that they have more of a part in their wellness. We can no longer outsource our wellness to another person or to another drug or to another surgery or modality. It has to come from within.
As you look now at your career and what you're doing, and I noticed that your focus is on bioresonance today and not acupuncture and not chiropractic. Do you believe you are doing what you should be doing?
I can't imagine doing anything else. I didn't expect to do this as a job. This came to me when I was working on my husband. I had people call me. I mean, I've been a doctor in this area for a long time, and I'd have people call me and ask, can you help me? I have cancer. Or can you help my daughter? She's having anxiety and stomach issues, and she can't make it through a day of school. And I'm like, I don't do cancer. I'm not working. I'm like, well, I have this machine. Do you want to try it? And it was through that, when I was seeing people change, that I realized that this was something I had to step into. I feel in some ways it chose me. There are great chiropractors here, and there are really phenomenal acupuncturists here as well, but there's nobody doing bioresonance. So that was the void that I decided to step into, because if I didn't do it, who was going to do it? I love my job, and it's weird to even call it a job because it's something I get to do. It's fairly exciting to me to be able to tap people back into that power that's within them, to see people's eyes light up when they recognize that, oh, this is that power. I'm connected to something else. Is that why when I think about my sister, they end up calling like right then and there? Or if I'm like, I'm going to get a good parking spot and one opens right up. I mean, we've all had those experiences. This is the science that's showing that there is something there. There is something. We can measure it. It's tangible. Now we're just trying to figure out how to harness it. And I think we're in the infancy, but that's what gets me up every day. It's like, okay, where can I take this next? Where can we go with this? What's next with this as far as healing or even connection to, creating the lives we want? We're always creating. We can either create by intention or by default. So what do we want to create? Where is this going to go? I wake up every day and I feel really blessed that because of this technology, somebody's life is going to be better for it.
Krista, I can't thank you enough for joining us today, for sharing your approach to treating and helping others, and for the enormous daily impact you're having on the health and well-being of our community.
Thank you for having me.
If you want to learn more about bioresonance therapy or meditation and how these fields can impact you, please visit Krista's website again at drkristagriffin.com. I personally can attest to the impact they can have, and I would just like to note I most certainly don't meditate sitting in a lotus position. Thank you to today's sponsor, the Open Space Alliance. Again, if you would like to do something about preserving the vanishing open space left in our town, please go to osalewis.org. All donations are welcome. Or Just tackle Jim Ford the next time you see him around town. He'll be happy to talk your ear off. And finally, a special thanks to you, our supportive listeners, for your patience this past month. As many of you know, August was a challenging month for our podcast family, but we're back, more excited than before, and already working on our next shows. Steve and I want to thank you for being responsible for over 6,000 downloads of the podcast. Absolutely phenomenal. Lots going to be happening in Lewis this fall. Festivals, markets, booze and brews, shows, parades, and over 24 events at the Lewis Public Library every single week of the fall. There literally is something for everyone. So I hope you'll be able to take advantage of all that's being offered. Wherever you are, have a wonderful day, and thanks for joining us. Until next time, this has been We in Lewis, the podcast.